This episode is brought to you by Essentia. A better you starts with better hydration. Essentia is on a mission to inspire people to do what matters most. Their proprietary ionization process transforms water from any source into ionized alkaline water, providing water that's 99.9% pure with a pH of 9.5 or higher. Essentia overachieving H2O, the #1 ionized alkaline water. Shop now.
Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Koshy's Business Builders. I'm Cess Busby.
And I'm Adam Bubb.
And we're here to sift through the deep, dark pasts of Australia's most fascinating founders.
Alas, this is not a true crime podcast, but this is First Act, the podcast where we have enlightening conversations with movers and shakers in business and life. We lift the veil on success and find out the stories, the warts and all stories behind successful people's journeys. If you like what you're listening to, pop a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Now, our guest today is an award-winning digital marketing guru who's walked his own path. In 2014, after working for e-commerce, B2B and online gaming brands, Tom Willis co-founded a game-changing service aimed at helping Australians access affordable legal support. And so Lawpath was born, and it's helped more than 250,000 small businesses. Now, Tom is a co-founder and chief marketing officer, but he also runs the online publication Marketing Trends, and he's taught more than 50 digital marketing courses for General Assembly. Now, Tom, we're all ears. Welcome to First Act.
Hey there, Cess. Thanks for having me. Hey, Adam.
Thanks so much for joining us, Tom. We're really happy to have you here with us on First Act. Now, we always start with what we call our First Act icebreaker. Now, just a random question to start the day. This might play to your strengths, actually. What is your favourite ad of all time and why?
My favourite ad of all time. Look, there's one that takes me back, and it's probably one that I remember the fondest, which is the Dumb Ways to Die commercial. If you remember that from the Victorian transport, when they were trying to basically get people to stop doing silly things on the tracks. They came up with the catchy jingle. It was very cleverly done. I think that's the one. Yeah. That's the one. And and I just remember it being one that struck me as it was kind of like content marketing before content marketing was really a thing as well. It was just done in a very clever way, and I think it really influenced a lot of what we see now in the viral video world and what we're seeing every time we're jumping onto YouTube or Facebook and the like as well. So that's one that I'll always look back on fondly.
Did you ever see the game that went with that? My little kids were fascinated with it.
I do remember it, yes. Yeah. I can't recall too much of playing on it, but I do remember it being around at the time, yeah.
You can still get it, download it. It's actually a bit of fun.
That's amazing when something that's an advertising campaign just takes on a life of its own and it becomes something that people really want to engage in. Isn't that the dream, huh? That's the holy grail. That is our ice broken. Now, let's get straight into the meaty stuff. Now, Tom, what was your first job and did it teach you any lessons for your future self?
I went through, what a typical primary schooler would do, I suppose, in saying that I want to have my own money. I didn't get an allowance. I had to earn every dollar that I was given. Basically, my first job was actually going into paper runs. And so I was a young whippersnapper, probably 10 or 11. I was rolling up the local advertiser in my area. I grew up around Parramatta. We were handing out the Parramatta advertisers. So I would wrap them up. I would put them into my bike. I would go around to all of the local areas and put those in. So it was very much, I suppose, a lesson of, for one, it was persistence. It was very hard work, and especially when it was wet and you had to wrap them in the plastic bags as well. But then I think it was something that you learnt over time so much about what you can do around efficiencies. I went into doing junk mail and the like as well from that as well. And, it's all little things that actually become really big parts of business. And, I'd never thought about this at the time, but it was a lot easier to prepare the pamphlets ahead of time before you delivered them into the mailbox versus going to the mailbox, assembling all the different pieces of junk mail you had to put in and then doing that one at a time. And that whole production line piece, and you read books when you're older about lean startup methodologies and Toyota's revolutionary production line, and it's kind of going back to them saying, oh yeah, that's what I was doing when I was 10, 11 years old, handing out junk mail. So working out those efficiencies and how they then, I suppose, stick with you is pretty fascinating.
Is that child labour, 10, 11 years old?
We were getting paid, and I think, we were getting paid what I think at the time we thought was very handsome. And we said, well, look, if we can earn the money and buy more, I think at the time it would have been video games for the Nintendo 64. And if we can earn those, then, I can't, mum and dad can't be too mad at me for playing too many games if I've earned the money to buy them myself. So I suppose there was a bit of justification there and gave us probably a little bit more rope in other things. So I was happy with it.
Now, a little birdie, LinkedIn, tells us you founded TW Music Lessons 14 years ago. This would have been your first business, right? What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So going into school, and particularly high school, I found myself as very much, and I've always been a generalist. I've been someone who, I'm quite good at most things, but I'm not, particularly strong at any one thing. And so when I went through schooling, probably the thing I was strongest at was more on the creative side of things. And, I was quite an accomplished musician. I was like a classically trained pianist, did all of my different grades in piano, took up guitar when I was in high school as well. And, did quite well on that side of things, and managed to, top my grade in music at school. And when I was moving into university, one of the things that I found was that I didn't have enough time to really kind of continue on with that path. I didn't think it was ever going to be something that I could do full time in actually going out and being a musician. But I loved just being able to find things that would then challenge me to continue to play and to pick up the instruments. So basically I started my own tuition business, and it was really conducted through going to all of the local schools, putting an ad in their newsletter, doing a couple of different, local directory listings. And this was in my parents' house. They had a granny flat out the back, set that up into a bit of a music studio where I had an electric piano, I had a couple of guitars, and I started bringing in students. And so that became something that I became actually quite good at it, not because I was the best musician, but I found in a lot of ways my own niche. So I found that what I was really good at was getting someone who had never picked up an instrument before. And, these were typically young primary school kids. I was very good at helping them to find interest in it. So what you typically would see when I went to music class would be that you'd go in, they would, give you all of these classical music songs to go and learn, and you'd just be bored out of your brains. You're like, I never actually want to play this. I don't enjoy playing this. So, I remember I had a couple of students that I would go to their places as well. And I went to one of theirs, and I had these two identical twins who would drive me crazy because they just never wanted to learn any of the songs that we were looking at. And I remember one of them was watching this anime special, and it had like a Linkin Park song. And I was like, I can teach you how to play the melody of this. And he was, oh my God, that's so cool. Yes. Can I please learn that? And it really changed how everything I then did in the business, which was then very much like, hey, let's find songs that you want to learn. We'll teach them in a way that helps you to continue to own your craft. And that was a business that I did all the way up to even when we founded Lawpath. I was still spending my weekends running that business. And it was only something that, I stopped over the last couple of years with time. So, I absolutely loved every part of it, and got me playing instruments, which was always something I wanted to continue doing.
Do you miss that musical connection then, now that you're no longer doing it?
Look, things have changed a little bit for me now in that I've got a young son, and so he wants to hear every iteration of a Wiggle song that can be played across every other instrument. So you find your own ways into doing that, and I assume when he gets a little bit older that it'll probably scratch that itch a little bit more once again. I do miss it at times to time, but I still have the opportunity to pick up the instruments as well. So I still try to keep them around. That's one thing I found as well is you've got to keep them in your line of sight. As soon as they go into storage, that's the end of them. So you've always got to keep them. And for me, they're right in the center of the living room. So picking them up all the time, driving my wife crazy, but my son loves it.
Is he requesting Elephant, the Triple J hottest 100 number one song of this year?
He does actually like that. Yeah,
it is really good.
Anything Wiggles is his jam.
So, look, we've talked a bit about your kind of beginnings with business and small business. Was that something that even from a young age, like were you around small business in your family, or did you know that entrepreneurship was going to be part of where you go?
Yeah, not really, to be honest. So my parents had always been, managers of other larger organizations. My mum had worked in travel as a travel agent, and my dad had worked in retail as a manager. And but both of their fathers were both entrepreneurs. So on my father's side, it was very much into local business. He had bought a number of local businesses up on the central coast of New South Wales, and my grandfather on my mother's side was a very accomplished chartered accountant who had run his own business as well. So it's quite funny because it's something that I only really learn about in going into my own vocations into business, what that looked like. But I wouldn't say that I'm the typical entrepreneur who's had this. You hear stories of kids who were selling snacks ahead of the canteen, and they were doing all of those entrepreneurial pieces from a very, very young age. And I think in a lot of respects that wasn't me. It was something that I really learned through my experiences that was something that I wanted to be good at. And one of the things that I found personally is, as I mentioned before, like the fact that I was a generalist and I enjoyed doing multiple things and loved wearing multiple hats. I think that really serves you really well into entrepreneurship as well, where you're having to do that. So while it wasn't something that, was like a natural calling to me, once I'd found it, I loved every bit of it.
Now, marketing is your main jam these days. Now, I reckon that storytelling is at the heart of good marketing. So were you a storyteller as a kid? Did you come from a family that was really great at spinning a yarn? Did you tell a good campfire tale?
Yeah, absolutely. It probably came in a lot of respects that my brother is someone who will talk anybody's ear off, and I was there was about just under 2 years of an age gap between us, and I just always wanted to keep up with him, and he was always very much the charismatic, the big talker. You give him a topic and he would just run with it for forever. And so my aim in everything that I did as a young kid was I just want to be that little bit better than him, or at least be able to compete with him. And so that just drove me the whole time. And so he's ended up, he's very accomplished in radio. He's had a number of his own shows. He's very much kind of continued down that path. But I always at an early age, I was competing and trying to just keep up, and we did a lot of it. We would go camping quite a bit. We were, very outdoorsy kids. We would do a lot of that. Loved trying to come up with the best horror story around the campfire, and they were all probably terrible, but we loved it, and we put our own spin on them. So it has been something, from a very early age I've been attached to.
So when you were at uni, you did comms and journalism, but when did you realise that marketing was really your thing?
Yeah, so when I was at university, I was doing like a public communication degree, which had a major in advertising, and I was doing a number of different subjects, and really, in all honesty, just trying to work out what it was that I wanted to do. And it was when I was looking for work. So I had a job where I was that person who would go to all of the different Woolworths and do the free sampling. So I'm sure you've all seen them before, where you're giving out like the free samples of the cheese or the the new flavor of shapes or whatever that would be. And that was my job. And then I had a car accident actually going between the jobs, and my car was written off, and I couldn't do that job anymore. So I was like, okay, I better go find a new job. And then I managed to get a job at a company called Spreets, which was an online group buying company. And they were looking for someone to come in like a marketing analyst role, do a lot of reporting for them. And so I applied for that, which was a part-time job while I was still at university, managed to get in there. And then that, in a lot of respects, changed my worldview on everything. It really opened this door to digital marketing, which I wasn't really, I didn't have anything real understanding in it at all. It was very new at the time. It wasn't taught in university in any real capacity. And basically in that role, I was their fourth employee. They said, we're going to teach you how to basically send out all of our daily deal emails. We've got a list of 1.7 million people. We send to 5 different cities 3 times a day. So, and just so you know, it's about 75% of the revenue that the business brings in. So no pressure, Tom, but yeah, we want you to do this. And yeah, I wasn't even working full time for the organization at the time. These baptisms of fire that I was able to get through that experience really then opened me up to then saying, okay, this is something that I really want to get into, and specifically the digital marketing side of it, where I was able to really combine, what I love from the creative angle, but then also being able to really leverage the data, talk about things with a little bit more objectivity, and yeah, very much found my calling, and it was through that first job.
At that time, there weren't very many deal sites around. Spreets was one of the first, and they got bought out by Yahoo, I think $41 million deal, something like that. What kind of insight did that give you into the startup ecosystem, given that you were employee number 4? I'm sure you were pretty au fait with the goings-on of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job actually as that analyst role was to do all of their weekly reporting. So it was, all of the financials, how much was being spent on marketing, how many users that was generating, and then the revenue that was being generated off of that. So, I was really fortunate that the transparency that allowed me to see was really strong. And I think one of the things that I really learned through that was the founders of the business were, tremendous entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things that I learned was that, while they'd been the people who had the idea, they'd taken the risk, and, they were the ones who were running the show. They were they were remarkably relatable. They were just like every other person that I'd known, just potentially with, a bit more of an appetite for risk, some strong leadership skills as well. But, they weren't this person that you would put on a pedestal that you'd never be able to reach. And so I think I found through that, oh, wow, this is something that if you've got an idea and you're willing to give it a shot and put everything into it, make some tough decisions along the way, then, there isn't that much that separates, these entrepreneurs that we look at with such high regard and just your everyday human beings. So that was the big part for me. And as I've gone through my journey, that's been very, very consistent with the other leaders of businesses I've worked with. So anyone can do this is really, I guess, the moral of the story.
For anyone listening, that is such a great point. That it is something that I guess when you're around inspiring people, you can learn from them and you can learn how to be an entrepreneur. I mean, we speak on this podcast we've spoken to quite a few people who really just knew, like you said, like they were pretty much born thinking, okay, I'm a born entrepreneur. I could see myself doing it. But the fact that you can learn it is really inspiring. Now, I think that sort of leads us to, how did you meet the people who would go on to become your co-founders? Because there are 4 of you. And was there a moment where that just clicked?
Yeah, so it was a bit of an interesting story, this one, where one of the co-founders was actually one of the people that I had worked with at Spreets, and we'd been looking for an opportunity to do something together again. And at the time, I'd worked in a number of different roles, and I'd spent a lot of my time after hours really when I wasn't working, I was trying to build my own businesses, and these were all typically online businesses. I'd created a couple of different, freelancing businesses. I'd built out some blogs. I built out a couple of online communities. I was trying all of these different things usually with myself, but with other people as well, and learning so much about what was going into starting a business. And one of the things that I always struggled with was just I suppose the boring compliance side of it was actually just getting the right registrations in, making sure that I had the right type of contracts in order with clients, and that I was doing everything that was legally compliant, and it wasn't leading to headaches down the track. And so while I was doing all of these things, had a couple of chats with the other founders of Lawpath, and the idea of really trying to democratize the law and bring the law to something where it's transparent, it's accessible, and it's affordable was something that as soon as that whole premise and bringing that to life came to me, and they talked about what they were looking to do, I thought, yep, this is exactly this cross section of what I've been looking for. And while I didn't come with the idea, what I really wanted to come with was, I think that the way that we can get this going, we knew that we wanted to make the law more accessible, do that through technology, but where I thought that the ideal angle was, hey, let's not just try to do this with everyone and not have a focus. This is for small business. There is so much that we can do in the starting, the running, the scaling, and the sailing of businesses. And this is something that then, I thought was going to be the angle that we went down. And so that's what we did. So we started up the business. It became very much for us a big fact-finding mission at the start. We had a lot of different ideas of different products and services that we wanted to put out. We found eventually that, as I said, and as the hypothesis very much rang true, that the businesses is where that we wanted to go after, and that's where we were having a great deal of our success. And so, while there've been a lot of changes to product, changes to personnel, and different pieces along the way, the thing that we've always tried to really hold true is that we support and we champion these businesses. And being one of those myself, it was something that I was always so passionate about. And I'm looking back at now where we are with it, it's truly remarkable. I love the idea of, we're at a point now where we're starting about 1 in 20 of the businesses in Australia. And you think about how that then impacts in the likes of how many people that's employing, how much money that's bringing into the economy, how many opportunities that's creating. It's quite remarkable. And probably don't take enough time to sit back and think about how incredible that is and how exciting that's been to be a part of.
Yeah, so when you guys came in, you really were disruptors of that traditional law firm idea by making it more accessible, by disrupting in that way. You really leveraged technology to be able to do that, and I think that's kind of changed the legal landscape. There's there's Legal Vision's, other people that have come on board since you guys started. How do you think Lawpath can hang on to its disruptor status?
Yeah, so I think what holds Lawpath in a really unique position is that we've always been the technology platform first, and it took us a little bit of a time to work out, that this was the way that we wanted to go, because we had components of service and of more online SaaS that software as a service that we would really look to push. And we really worked out that what works really well for us is using technology to give accessibility to the law, where if not for somebody like Lawpath, there wouldn't be an alternative. And I knew this myself as a business owner. If you were trying to get the legal protection that you needed, that your contracts in order, getting the right type of legal advice, unless you were at a certain level of maturity in your business, you had to fork out money that you didn't want to part with at the time. It was a really big investment for you to do. And so what we have found through, everything that we've done is that I definitely wasn't alone in that. And, the statistics, I think that the number is 87% of small businesses do not get access to the law, to the legal solutions that they need and the legal support that they need because of both the time and the prohibitive costs. So we find ourselves in a position where, if not for somebody accessing a way of being able to access the law through technology, they simply would not have anything to do. They would wing it. They would wait for something to go wrong, and then once at that point, it would often mean the downfall of the business. So that ability for us to focus in an area where a lot of other law firms and the like, they don't want to focus because the money isn't there for them. The opportunities are smaller. But for us, because we can do a lot of that repetitive, more consistent work that you see that a lot of these businesses need, we can make it work for us. And it means that the volumes that we're dealing with are so much more significant than your typical business. So it's like our own, in a lot of respects, it's our own category. Everyone talks about big law and they talk about mid-tiers and they talk about small law as well. In effect, it's tiny law that we're really going after. It's like our whole own category. So that's always where we've wanted to play, and I think that's always been our advantage.
Making big differences to tiny law. I've just got your new tagline right there.
Yeah, I might steal that one off you, Adam.
I'll be trademarking that. We'll be back in a moment with more from Tom Willis after this very, very short break.
When was the last time I took a road trip? How many national parks could I hit in 2 weeks? What about hotels? Wait, hey, Erica, how much am I spending on travel?
When your questions about life turn into questions about money, there's Erica, the virtual financial assistant to help you spend, save, and plan smarter. Only from Bank of America. What would you like the power to do? Erica is only available in the English language. You must download the latest version of the mobile banking app, only available on select mobile devices. Your chat may be recorded and monitored for quality assurance. Message and data rates and additional terms may apply. Bank of America N.A., member FDIC.
We're back with Tom Willis from Lawpath. Now, Tom, not coming from a law background, what has been the steepest learning curve for you in marketing Lawpath? And in kind of adding to that question, we've kind of touched on the fact that it is kind of a bit of an asset in a way, right? Like coming from being able to come at it from a small business owner perspective as you have.
Absolutely. I think it's been, in a lot of respects, one of the biggest advantages that I've had in that. For a lot of my career, I've been the anti-law. I've a lot of the companies that I worked for, their legal counsel spent a lot of specific time with me because I was always trying to push the envelope on doing, different promotions and giveaways and trying to see how close to the line we could really go. And so when you're combining that with having a look at the law, it was often, everyone saw it as like, that's not quite your obvious fit, Tom, in a lot of these ways. But I think what the advantage that I found I have, and people that we've brought into the business have, is that because they're not looking at different solutions to these typical legal problems and the way that the services are being delivered, they come at it of basically, we can really take things back to having a look at first principles. We can build out what we think is going to be the right delivery mechanisms, and we don't have the bias that a lot of that is attached to. And so I found that to be, in a lot of respects, really advantageous. There was a very steep learning curve for me. I feel like I now have a law degree, having never actually studied anything in law, just from practice. And it is something that very much built over time. And I think it's been one of these things where, like anything, you're learning a language, you're taking on a new subject matter. There's very much an 80-20 to everything that you do, that Pareto principle. And I find that with a lot of what we talk about, because we're dealing with a lot of businesses of similar sizes, they've got a couple of very common requirements that come up and that they're all going to need and that are applicable for them. If we can really hone in on those, we're going to cover, a lot of the types of businesses that are coming through. And then, we're able to use, fortunately enough for us, our technology then to help with things like recommendations, next steps, and, being able to take people down certain roads with that as well. But Yeah, look, I still get pulled back from compliance, and the lawyers that we have in house at different times for saying, "Hey, Tom, I think you're saying something that we can't quite say." So it's good to have them to have them around at the same time, because I think I'm always going to be that person who pushes how far that we can go.
The old tension between marketing, what marketing want to say, and what the lawyers want you not to say.
So branding's the bread and butter of marketing, but it's something that's not usually considered very much by startups. It's often ignored. So as Lawpath's CMO, how did you develop the brand messaging?
It's something that, in all honesty, to begin with, we did ignore as well. It was something that we thought, and I thought specifically, being the one who was leading the marketing charge, that the way that we could grow things was very much, let's just put the products and services in front of the right type of people, and that would typically look after itself. That happened to a degree, but because we were into a big amount of education that had to go in, people weren't used to being able to use technology to create their own documents online and to access lawyers online. They were used to paying a premium for someone to very much hold their hand and take them through everything. So it took me quite a while. And I think, there were a couple of things that changed. I think that there's been a shift in how businesses want to interact with legal services, and they've got much more comfortable with doing things online as things like, obviously we've had COVID that's hit and has forced people into that way. And then that's kind of changed a few of the behaviors. But, even prior to that, I think one of the things that we, really needed to hone down on was, when we're looking at a brand side of things, who we were talking to. And we learned very quickly through who we were targeting that the business owner was who we were after. It wasn't the head of operations or the legal counsel. We were dealing specifically with the business owner. So we needed to make everything that we talked about very much through their lens and putting ourselves into their shoes. And, being business owners ourselves, that was quite something that we could conveniently take on that persona. And then, in doing that as well, I think one of the things that we needed to learn was that we needed to invest in building awareness about what we did. And I think that, you see a lot of businesses that they start up, and particularly online startups, they say, well, we're just going to invest every dollar that we have goes into online advertising. And, because we can measure every success that we're having with that, it's going to be very, very easy for us to build a good user base, and then basically everything will look after itself. And while that happens to a degree, there needs to be an investment into brand as well, I've learned, because you actually need, in a lot of respects, to create demand that is then you can then harvest based on the fact that people are looking for services like yours. And the only way of doing that is making people aware of what it is that you do, really, communicating those value propositions, and, building a little bit of demand yourself, in addition to, trying to take advantage of what is already there. So it takes, both of those two-pronged attacks to happen. And then I think things very much, pick up and the momentum builds.
So how do you make sure that Lawpath's marketing stories actually have cut through?
That's a good question. There's a couple of things that we need to think of there. The stories themselves to get the cut through, I think most importantly, they need relatability. And we very much try to hone in on working out who it is that is using Lawpath, and then how they are benefiting from Lawpath, how we can then tell their story, and then by doing that, how we can attract more of these styles of businesses. And so, in the early days of Lawpath, the way that we did this, and I would recommend this to any business owner when they're starting out, if you've got a small customer base, it is obviously very difficult to do a big quantitative analysis of what industry they're in, their employee size and everything else. But if you're doing that on a qualitative level in an early stage, you can learn so much. And that can be through just, having a look at who's signing up, adding them on LinkedIn, sending them an email, having a look across their social profiles and having a chat to them as well, and actually learning then about what they're using you for and what they would like to see in the service that you have. So if you are doing that, and then you're finding out what it is that people are are doing and are using you for, you can then look to find more of them. You can tell their stories themselves. And through them being the champion of what it is that you do, I believe it allows you to have cut through because the relatability is just so high, and you're solving a problem that they themselves will have.
Now, with Lawpath, you've got your ear to the ground about the most pressing problems Aussie small businesses are facing. What keeps them coming up time and time again? What are the worst offenders? What are the issues that you kind of feel might be getting worse and worse that business owners kind of need more of a hand with?
Yeah, this comes up a lot. We talk a lot to business owners, and because we're registering a lot of the businesses at the early stage, we see kind of two kinds. We see when those mistakes are about to be made, and we see when those mistakes have happened, and we're having to help with cleaning things up on that side as well. One of the common things that we see, and this is something that anyone who's been in business should be, if they're in business and they're new in business, they should be mindful of. And if they've been in business, they might have learned about this the hard way, is that you're going to start a business more often than not. People start with co-founders. Usually the co-founders have some sort of, they're your friends or their family, and you don't have any kind of, paperwork, contract in place, agreement that then says, this is what our roles and responsibilities are going to be. They just say, hey, let's just have a chat about it. This is the pub. Let's do this 50-50 and we'll see where we end up. And, you can only imagine what happens. There's so many famous examples of this. You only have to look at what happened with Facebook and, with Zuck and with the Winklevoss twins and everything else that was attached there. But then looking at that in, typical examples that we see is that the one person in the business is very heavily invested into it, is doing a lot more than somebody else in the business, but they've got a 50-50 split of what they're entitled to, when one of them is, sees this as a long-term thing and maybe another one hasn't, and they've gone off and, found another job or whatnot as well. And then so, it puts them in a really compromising position. So it's just so important that you get this in writing, what it is that each of you are going to be doing, so that you've got a leg to stand on if something changes in that arrangement and things do need to be split. So that's one that we really commonly see, and that a lot of businesses have to then deal with. I think another thing as well that we see a lot of is when businesses are starting out, we find that there's two extremities that we see. There's the business that starts out and does nothing in the way of putting in those things like founder agreements, shareholder agreements, and putting a good infrastructure in place. And then they find themselves in really bad positions down the track. They've engaged with clients, and they've again, it's just been verbal agreements and whatnot, and then that's turned into difficult. That's become really difficult when they're chasing money or whatnot. And then you see the other extremity with these businesses where they protect absolutely everything. They've trademarked themselves in 20 countries, and have set up these really convoluted structures of their business, and they haven't turned over a single dollar yet. So I think one of the things that we really try to be, and the mantra that we say is, hey, let's help you to get your legal infrastructure in place at a very affordable cost. Once you've got that in, if there are additional pieces that you need, we can always add them along the way if you're wanting to protect IP, or if you're doing capital raising or whatnot, and there's additional requirements that you need. But don't go all in on protecting something if you're at a point where that money is better spent, in developing things, investing in marketing, into developments and everything else as well.
That's such a good point, because we've seen over the past couple of years a real boom in people starting businesses, especially over the pandemic. You always hear those stats about how 1 in 5 businesses will fail in the first 2 years, and numbers to that effect. How do you make sure you're not the one in that statistic? I mean, you've already kind of alluded to the fact that you might be putting every single egg you have into one basket and going, all right, we're protecting something, we're trademarking it in 20 countries before you've even really proven the concept, Like, how do you make sure you're not one in that statistic?
Yeah. There's a few things that I think are really important here. One is I think focus is a really key piece of what any business should be doing. And so this comes into really every part of your business, whether that's marketing, whether that's business development. I see one of the things I think a lot of businesses fall to the sword of, and actually we found this in the early days of Lawpath, is you've got so many opportunities there that entrepreneurs have this real tendency of just it's things like feature creep and ideas creep, and they just have all these great ideas that come out, and they go, right, I'm going to completely change my goalpost. I'm going to look at what I'm doing and then say, no, we're going to add this in, we're going to prioritize this, and we're going to focus on jumping into that. And that might be a great idea, but if it puts you off of track of something that you've then put a lot of time and effort and dedication into, often you'll just find yourself consistently doing that, and you'll be looking at it's that whole shiny new thing type of syndrome that we see people have. So I think that that's something that is really key. And if I can talk about my own experiences at what we found when at Lawpath, and what really we were able to drive success with there was it was purely focusing on the areas that were important to us, and laser focusing down for us was, we want to help small businesses. We've got a couple of key solutions that we have across our platform that really help these small businesses. So while we will get people reaching out to us to offer us new opportunities elsewhere that will take development resources and we'll need to bring on headcount and whatnot, let's focus on what we do well. Let's really get that into a position where then we think that can be productized, that we can bring in people to help and to delegate that work out to, before we then move on to tackling something else. So I think that for me is the biggest one, and that really comes into every part of what you're doing in business. That focus is just so important.
Now, apart from your focus as CMO at Lawpath, you also have a focus on the industry at large. You've got a platform, Marketing Trends, where you unpack the routine, the stories, the process, the practices of some of Australia's top marketers. Now, what inspired you to start Marketing Trends?
Yeah, so Marketing Trends was really built out of, really, in all honesty, it was a selfish desire that I had to talk to more people in the industry. And I found that once we had our little boy and the kids come along, that it becomes a little bit more difficult to go out to different networking events and to fill your time in those kind of ways. So I said, well, what if we have conversations with marketers that we want to be having conversations with? We publish those findings that would help other people who were trying to learn from them. And what we really wanted to dig into there was, what role does marketing play in the different organizations of the leaders that we spoke to? How do they make up their teams? What are the different tools and resources that they would recommend? And it's through that also that we've been able to pick up on, what are the really big trends in the industry? What's keeping marketers up at night? What are the challenges that they have? And we've done now over 100 different features of different marketing leaders across Australia. And I've learned so much through that. I've developed such a fantastic network where I can reach out to these different marketers at different stages to pick their brains on different things. And one of the things that I always need to remember is that you can get so much more out of your day by just having a 15 or half an hour conversation with someone who's tackling a similar problem to you, but maybe in a different industry, or, tackling in a different way, than you can just, really burning the midnight oil for 8-9 hours and trying to work it out yourself. So, it's really enabled me to be able to have more of these conversations. And I think it's really important as you get, whether you're a founder or you're high up in an organization, and that you don't have those people around you to be able to bounce those ideas off, I think it's really important to find them.
That's so true. You should be going out having as many conversations as you can with people whose opinions you trust, because it can spark great new ideas. Now, just to wrap up, marketing plays a really big role in the success of small businesses. What would be your one piece of marketing strategy advice that small business owners cannot afford to ignore?
Look, I'm a very numbers-driven person, so I would say that my advice would be, whatever you are doing from a marketing angle, you need to then be considering what that's driving on the other side of things. So every dollar that you're putting in, you should be looking at what is what then that's leading to in how many customers you're gaining, and then what those customers are worth to you. And even if you're doing things like, as we've talked about, brand marketing and, trade marketing or events or whatever that might be, where you want to think about with that, what is a target that I'm looking to do in terms of being able to acquire customers or bring in more leads or inquiries or whatever that might be. You need to set out what that goal is going to be, and then also what is then going to be the longer term value of that on the other side of things. And you should be doing that for everything that you're doing. I think one of the things that a lot of businesses do is they go, oh, we tried radio, it didn't work for us, or we put up a few billboards and it didn't work for us. And you say, well, what were you measuring? What was your measurement of success that was then going to tell you whether or not you wanted to continue with that? And they haven't thought through that. They just thought, we're going to do one thing and it's going to mean that all of these other things change. And I think it's by making sure with whatever it is that you're doing that you've got a clear way of being able to measure that then you're able to incrementally look and say, all right, if this brings me more visitors, I'm going to do this to bring me more leads. If this brings me more leads, I'm going to do this to bring me more customers. And you're thinking through all of those little interactions that are going to happen. But first and foremost, just measure it, because, as everybody says, well, the famous saying, what gets measured gets done. And I think that applies to all parts of life.
That's right. And look, it's like you're saying, it's like it's a bit of a Rubik's Cube of like reorganizing and recalibrating and then trying something new and then trying something that may not have worked that well last time and going, okay, what am I going to learn from it? What can I do differently? And eventually at some point you click into whatever that perfect Rubik's Cube looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Tom, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Thanks so much for joining us on First Act.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam and Sess. It's been great.
If you'd like to find out more about Lawpath, go to lawpath.com.au. Thank you to everyone who's listening. We love producing this show for you each week. Make sure to join us next week for another fantastic First Act conversation.